All right, Derek, it's time now for the games of the week presented by BetMGM. We got a bunch of good games this week, so we're going to talk about several of them, but come on, there's one marquee game. There's one that stands above the rest, and that is the Super Bowl rematch between the Chiefs and the 49ers. Chiefs at Niners. Niners are -1.5 in this game. It feels like this game should have more excitement around it. That was my prevailing thought as I was considering it over the course of the week, is that, yeah, this is a Super Bowl rematch between objectively two of the best teams in the league. If you look at any metric, they are still in the top 4 or 5, even if they've been slightly disappointing. But this just doesn't have the juice that you would think a Super Bowl rematch 7 weeks into the season would have between two teams that are still actually very good.
It's disappointing because like we had just last week we had a game that was more exciting than I think we would have thought coming into week 1 in Ravens-Commanders. Like, who would have thought before the season that would have been one of the games that we were so excited to talk about? This almost feels like the opposite, where going into the season, you look at the schedule, you see what's going on, and you're like, man, Super Bowl rematch, Patrick Mahomes versus the 49ers defense. Like, Brock Purdy, is he going to take the next step? And like some of that stuff has kind of happened, but it's still just the game feels a little bit flatter than it should. It's kind of like why we haven't done a whole lot of talking about both of these teams, even though they're both still, like you said, objectively top 6 teams, probably both.
That's also part of it, is that we haven't really discussed either of these teams that much. And it's for reasons, right? That the Chiefs played on Monday night. The Niners played on Thursday night. The Niners are 3-3. There are a bunch of contributing factors to why this feels a little off. But I think one of the biggest ones for me is that the Chiefs offense at one point, at several points over the last 6 or 7 years as we've been doing this, had been the most exciting thing about the sport. And even if they're, according to a lot of metrics, still a good offense right now, how do you feel when you're watching the Kansas City Chiefs offense right now?
I watching the Kansas City Chiefs offense, it feels like gravity is heavier. Feels like I weigh 40 more pounds. It feels like the 30 minutes after eating Thanksgiving dinner. Like it just feels heavier and slower than it should. And they're not a bad offense. That's why it's kind of confusing. Like, they are still an efficient offense. It just still feels like such a slog, and it's not very enjoyable to watch right now.
I can't imagine, I can't believe that this has happened. We've gotten to a point where the most talented quarterback, arguably the best quarterback I've ever seen, is not fun to watch. He is the captain and he is the pilot of an objectively boring NFL offense. And I just can't believe that's happened. I looked up the stat earlier this week, and it was shocking in the context of everything, but it wasn't shocking after watching them. Right now, Patrick Mahomes is averaging 3.6 air yards per completion. Okay? 3.6. Over the course of an entire season, that would be the lowest mark in the next gen stats era, which goes back to 2016. We're not talking about like a bottom 20. We're not talking about decidedly below average. It would be the lowest mark in the last 9 seasons. And we're talking about a guy who, again, once was in charge of some of the most high-flying offenses we've ever seen.
And this is the exact the type of offense they are running right now, where they are efficient running the ball. They're still efficient passing the ball in terms of getting some easy yardage. They're a really good screen team, all this other stuff, but they're not explosive down the field, and they're not even getting that many explosives in the run game. That's what they drafted Patrick Mahomes to not be. Because that's what they were with Alex Smith, and they were a good team, right? 10, 11 games, constantly in the playoffs, still a hard out, all that stuff.
And not even the end of the Alex Smith era. We're talking about like
Right.
2014 Alex Smith era.
Right, when Andy Reid first took over, and this was like the first step for them. Now it's like we've gotten the opposite, where we had all the super cool stuff that they had at the end of Alex Smith era, and now we've like we've reverted back into that, where they're kind of back at step 1 with like what the Andy Reid offense can be, and some of that is like team building and stuff, obviously, and we'll get into that. But it's just it's frustrating to watch what has been, or what was the most exciting quarterback for, I mean, what was it, 4 years? Now just kind of be,
He's good at what they're asking him to do, but they're just not asking him to do very much because the offense isn't really capable of it. And I think that the receiving talent is part of this, right? Really, the only explosive receiving option they have right now is Xavier Worthy, who's a very incomplete player. Like, he just can't give you a lot in a bunch of different areas. Other than that, we know there are limitations to the other pass catchers. There are other elements of this that have led to them feeling as inconsistent, as frustrating as they are. And I think part of that is the pass protection issues. Like when I go back and watch that game against the Saints, Mahomes is constantly being pushed off of his spot. He's drifting one way or another. He's trying to maneuver around the pocket. Even when there were some shots down the field to be had, there was like a big over route to Xavier Worthy that if he wanted to let it rip, he probably could have. But I don't think he's trusting what he's seeing right now and how he's feeling, because the left tackle has been a consistent issue the entire season. And Juwan Taylor's had his problems. So right now, I just think that Mahomes is feeling incredibly unsettled about a lot of the aspects of this offense. And I think that's also something that's leading to some of the inconsistencies.
I think a lot of that just comes down to the pass catchers. And, they kind of built this thing. I think the idea they had in mind with this pass catching unit, obviously with Hardman, then drafting Worthy and having Rashee Rice in there, is that the two other speedsters could really stretch the field.
And
Rice
Hollywood Brown.
And Hollywood Brown. Like you would have those two stretching the field, him and Worthy stretching the field. That's what I meant to say when I said Hardman. I don't know why I said Hollywood Brown. Maybe that's, or I don't know why I said Hardman instead of Hollywood Brown. Maybe that's just me like putting all of the fast Chiefs receivers into one player. But anyway, the idea was to have those two guys stretch the field. Rashee Rice be your consistent guy. Okay, Rice has been out of the lineup. Hollywood Brown has been out of the lineup the whole year, and he's probably going to miss the whole year. And Worthy hasn't really been a very consistent player for them. So like the only guy for the most part, the only actual wide receiver that Patrick Mahomes seems to trust is Juju Smith-Schuster, who was on the Patriots and couldn't like crack their starting lineup. And I think we all agree that the Patriots starting receiving core is like one of the worst in the league and is going to make life hard on Drake May. And so it's just the fact that they've gotten to a point where they're just like, all right, let's get Patrick Mahomes just a guy he can trust. Is the guy good? Not really, but if that's at least going to get the ball out of Patrick Mahomes' hands, that's all that they've, kind of wanted to jump to. That is not a good spot to be in when you have what is probably the most talented quarterback I've ever seen.
And the Juju Smith-Schuster production against the Saints, if you go back and watch those plays, he's just getting lost in coverage. Like the big chunk plays, they're in cover 2, and McKinstry just doesn't get enough depth, and he's just sitting there in the hole because the safety got pulled out by a vertical route. It's not guys creating separation on their own. It's guys getting lost by virtue of like what the play design looks like. And I honestly think if they're going to get explosives against the Niners, that's probably their best shot to get them. The difference, though, and I think a lot of people have made this comparison in what the Chiefs offense looks like now compared to what the Chiefs offense looked like last year. And it's better right now than it was during those frustrating stretches of 2023. The biggest key difference is that they can run the ball. They're one of the most efficient running teams in the NFL. They're running it on their terms, and they're running it very well. And I know it's a very boring answer to what we should be watching for in this game, but I honestly think how well they run the ball against the Niners is probably going to dictate how this side of the ball goes.
Absolutely. Like if you're not going to be able to get any of these explosives in the passing game, you better at least be able to stay on schedule and try to make things easier for Patrick Mahomes. So he's not in 3rd and 9s, and he can be in 3rd and 3, and you can just convert that way. Maybe even just with the scramble if he doesn't really trust any of what he's looking at. But they have been a really good rushing team. Right now they have a 48.1% rushing success rate, which is 4th best in the league. They don't really have any negative plays in the run game either. Only 25.7% of their runs go for nothing or worse, which is the 3rd best in the league. They're not explosive at all. Is part of the problem.
Let's get back to the original point. It's like 5 yards. It's like 4.6 yards a carry every single time with like fucking Carson Steele and Kareem Hunt. And I just don't think I like that, even if it's working.
It is frustrating that they have no explosives. Those backs run really hard, though. Like, obviously, Carson Steele
listen to yourself. We're talking about the Kansas City Chiefs. This is the rationalizing that you're doing.
The problem is that in isolation, I do love this. I just don't love that this is the only thing the offense is good at. That's what's really frustrating. Like, I love all of this about the Lions, right? But the Lions are also like a really explosive passing offense. Jahmyr Gibbs can give you explosives in the run game. Like,
Jahmyr Gibbs isn't walking through that door for the Chiefs right now.
No, Jamal Charles is not coming back. Like we're not getting the reincarnated version of him. So it's nice that they have one thing, but they have like the most boring thing, and they're not explosive at all at that thing. So it's just they're a frustrating offense to watch, which is again crazy to say about a team that is 5-0.
Yeah, it's like you took the 2022 and 2023 Bengals and you kept the run game, but you removed Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Like that's what the Chiefs feel like right now. And why I think a lot of this stuff matters against the Niners specifically, if we're talking about some of the concerns with pass protection and just how unsettled that feels. Now you have Nick Bosa on the other side. Like Chase Young has had a fine season. Now you're dealing with Nick Bosa every single play, no matter which of the tackles he lines up against. So that's a concern. And also, them leaning into the run game, I think, even makes more sense in this game because the Niners are like 20th in run defense success rate. They were good against Seattle last week, but relatively, that has not been one of their strengths over the course of the year. So I think we're going to get a heavy dose of the same formula we've seen from the Chiefs for most of this season. And again, even if it's working, I don't have to like it.
And it's not even just that the Chiefs are good at running the ball and the Niners aren't very good at defending it. The Chiefs are good at running the ball in the particular way the Niners are really bad at defending it, which is just get double teams and mash them. Those defensive tackles are not built for that, and the non-Fred Warner linebackers are not built for that. And if there's one thing this Kansas City offensive line can do, that trio on the interior, they can really move people.
Let's get to the other side of the ball. So looking at that air yards per completion stat and the fact that Mahomes is on track for the lowest number since 2016. The guy who right now is on track for the highest number since 2016 is Brock Purdy right now. Mahomes is at 3.6 air yards per completion. Brock Purdy is at 9.1, which would be the highest mark in the next gen era. It just speaks stylistically to how different these offenses feel right now. And so now I'm wondering, what is this version of the Niners offense where we have all this down the field stuff? They're pushing the ball. It's a little bit more volatile. What does that look like against this Chiefs defense? Because the last time we saw the Chiefs play this team, they rolled out a blueprint that a lot of other defenses have been trying to follow this year. The Niners are still seeing man coverage at the highest rate in the league on third down. It went back down from like 70% back to a normal sort of rate out over the last couple games, especially after playing Seattle, who didn't play a ton of man coverage. But I'm wondering, we saw that blueprint from the Chiefs. Are we going to see something similar? Or are there concerns without L'Jarius Sneed and as currently constructed, this version of the Chiefs maybe isn't as set up to deal with the Niners that way?
You know, at first glance, when I think I looked at the Chiefs defense and I thought about the Niners offense, I was like, I don't know if they can get away with as much man coverage. But then the more I thought about it, if they trust to just let McDuffie follow Brandon Ayuk,
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm actually okay with the other body type versus body types that the Kansas City defense has to play a lot of man coverage, especially like Jamari Connor being able to come down and play like against George Kittle. Like
So that's
the
what
more
I like
thought
about it. Because
yeah.
if you do the three safety stuff, then McDuffie's kicked outside and you actually are set up to defend them. Like big nickel is a good way to attack the Niners. And that the Chiefs are comfortable living that way.
Exactly. Like I said, when I first thought about it, I was thinking of just like their base stuff where they have these massive outside corners, and it's like, I don't really know if I love that against like Brandon Ayuk, him being able to beat you that way. And I was like, I don't know, just get into some of your, like you said, funkier personnel combinations with the three safeties, and just let your best corner follow their best receiver, and pray that you can beat them that way.
And we saw that the teams that have given the Niners relative problems, I think both this year and last year, beyond the Chiefs, when you look at what the Vikings have done and some of like the drop eight stuff that they've done, they're just trying to funky it up as much as possible. And if there's one defensive coordinator that is willing to funky stuff up, we know that Steve Spagnuolo is in that bucket. And so what I'm curious about is, all right, he threw the curveball in the Super Bowl and played all that man. Now teams are playing a bunch of man. What does the spag zag look like in this game? Like, how does he go against type from what he's done and what other teams are doing? Because we've seen him do that in the past against this team specifically. I have no idea what that answer is, but I'm open to the thought that it might look a little bit different than we anticipate.
I think it absolutely might, because like you said, it's hard to predict where Spags is going to turn next. That's kind of what has made him one of the best guys over the past 3-4 years. So I don't know what it's going to be. What I will say for like the other side of this matchup is, I think probably the best way that you can get this Chiefs defense overall is attacking their linebackers in coverage and in
Mhm.
space, making those guys run, making Leo Chenal run, making Nick Bolton run. Would have been really good to have Christian McCaffrey for a game like this, where you can just throw a bunch of Texas routes at him, option routes, get him lined up in the slot, all that stuff. Part of the Niners' issue and why they look like a different offense now than they did, I think, especially last year, and especially in the red zone, is they just don't have McCaffrey to stress the middle of the defense that way. And I think like that's the best way to attack this Chiefs defense, where their front is really good. I still think their defensive secondary is really good. You really got to attack them over the middle. They just don't have their best weapon to do that right now, and I think that's pretty unfortunate for them.
The linebackers, even if they're not the best coverage players, they are thumpers. Like
Oh
those
yeah.
guys are physical players. And I think that's been one of the coolest bits of transition from the Chiefs defense from, let's say, the 2022 version to what we have right now. You saw this coming a little bit last year, but they're like objectively a good run defense now. And that's just such a strange thing to come to terms with when you think about a lot of the conversations we'd had about this team in like Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes era. But if you think about how they're constructed now, like Chenal is a monster. Tranquil will come downhill and hit you. Even their defensive front, like Karlaftis is a more physical player than some of the other edges that they've had. Mike Dana, who's a little bit banged up right now, like he's more of a tweener and gives you more size on the edge. They're able to hold up in that spot. So there would have been times, especially with McCaffrey, where you would have said, all right, just grind them down. Like that's the Niners' best path forward in this game. And the way things are right now, that's just not true anymore.
Yeah, and like Leo Chenal is kind of like the embodiment of it, where he is just, I mean, 250 pounds, just go and take on a guard and hit you that way. Willie Gay was like their linebacker who ran. And that's why I think over the middle of the field, it looks a little bit different, is that Willie Gay was their guy who, okay, he could cover a little bit. He could cover space. He could get to the perimeter. They swapped him out for more Leo Chenal snaps. And it's like, all right, we can't do that stuff as much. But you are not
I
moving
enjoy
these
that
guards.
trade-off, though.
It's been
the
good.
aggregate, I very much enjoy it.
Absolutely. I mean, especially last week where Willie Gay is like missing a tackle on Chris Godwin that springs a 50-yard touchdown. I mean, yeah, it's been a good trade-off for them.
Anything else from this game that you wanted to mention before we move on? Any nuggets, any just kind of more granular thoughts about what you're going to be watching?
I think that just the McCaffrey of it all is a big one. And I know I keep harping on this for what this offense is, but like he truly is why they transitioned to this more gun style of offense and like being in more like true drop back and giving Purdy that safety valve. The reason Purdy has the highest air yards ever, basically, or at least in the modern era, is because he just doesn't have McCaffrey back there. And like the results have been pretty good anyway. But it would be nice for the offense to have a little bit more of like a lifted floor with him in there. And it's obviously just unfortunate he's not there.
Before we get to our other games of the week, let's very quickly get to this week's sports screen. We're doing something a little bit different with this one, but it was so good that we decided to include it. This one is from Philip Porterfield, and he said, I would put the subject line is nothing matters. This suggestion will be a little unusual. I'm going to suggest a team that you shouldn't put on your fourth screen or any screen ever. It'll make your choice each week even easier with one fewer option, and this is coming from a fan of the team. The Dallas Cowboys shouldn't be on any of your screens because nothing they do matters. I honestly feel like there's a Bambino-like curse on the Cowboys. Jerry Jones gets all the attention and money he wants, and seemingly to him, nothing else matters. Even without postseason success for 30 years, they've been the highest valued sports franchise in the world, but it doesn't matter. They have some of the highest paid and most talented players at certain key positions. It doesn't matter. Will McClay produces amazing draft classes year after year, but it doesn't matter. How Jerry handles this team reminds me of a lyric from Godspeed You Black Emperor. I open my wallet and it's full of blood. I was born in the late 80s and grew up in East Texas. If I had cared about football then, I could remember their glory days. But I didn't watch football then, so I don't remember. Those times sound like folk stories and tall tales. When I got a little older, I started watching and my parents gifted me a Staubach jersey for Christmas. I wore it for good luck every Sunday and quickly found out it didn't matter. 30 years with incredible seasons, horrible seasons, and everything in between, and none of it has mattered. This team is a shadow on the wall of a cave. They're not real, and nothing they do matters. So please just eliminate them from your consideration each week. The mainstream sports media will cover them enough. But I will still watch. I'm still a fan of this forsaken team because nothing matters. Philip.
That's just beautiful.
Absolutely beautiful. I think
he's right.
He's so right. And I think that encapsulates what a lot of the fan base is probably feeling right now. And I had similar thoughts this week, just hearing Jerry rant on the radio and tell those guys that he'll replace them because they're asking the wrong questions. And I really have come to a place, and I've started to kind of form thoughts about this, is like, why is he doing this? Like, what does he get out of this? And you could say money and attention, but like, if they sold the Cowboys right now, he would make $15 billion. They would give him a check. He could walk away. If he wanted to turn it into content, if attention is what he's really after, couldn't he sell a reality show about selling the Cowboys to Netflix and do like an entire season about all the people that were calling him? There's plenty of attention to be had outside of this. If money and attention is the thing that you want and you can save yourself the embarrassment, just sell the team. Like, I truly don't know what any of this is for anymore.
No, money and attention, he already has plenty of that regardless of whether he owns the team or not. And like you said, he could get any of that, more of that, even if he wanted, if he just sold the team. I think it's just Jerry Jones is like, I think he is genuinely obsessed with making the Cowboys good. I think it's just one of those
Oh, I
things where
don't think
like
he is
we've
at all.
lost.
I don't think he gives a shit about making the Cowboys good. I really don't.
Really.
No, I really, really don't. I truly do not believe that he cares about making the Cowboys a winning football team.
I think he's just like completely lost the plot on how to do it. And when you're, I mean, listen, Jerry's an old man. Like, you probably just shouldn't be making many decisions for a football team at this point. That's more my read on it. But I don't know. There is a chance that maybe he just doesn't care anymore.
If the thought is, hey, let's try to win a Super Bowl, Jerry's getting a little bit older, I think that ship has sailed. You're further away from that end goal than you've been in each of the last like 5 years. I don't think that's happening. I feel like a way to kind of salvage this on his terms, in terms of like, all right, let's make this about me for the last time, would be doing something crazy like that. Could you imagine, like this week, it leaks out that Jerry Reinsdorf, a story in the Athletic, is willing to sell the White Sox. Look at the stir that caused. Could you imagine how much Jerry would own the news cycle for like 2 straight years if he was just like offhandedly, you know what? I'm going to lead to a reporter that I'm thinking about selling the Cowboys.
I mean, I don't know, man. I think he's like gonna be through it thick and thin until the end. Like, I just think that's what this is about.
I don't disagree with that. I'm saying if he really is after the things I think he's after, which are wealth and attention, that this would be a better way to do it rather than running your NFL franchise into the ground and inspiring reactions like this.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, and the Cowboys are going to sell more than almost any other NFL franchise just by virtue of being the Cowboys, having the name brand on it.
They are the most valuable sports
Yes.
franchise in the world.
Yeah.
And again, I just think that there are better ways to have people pay attention to you and be rich than to torture an entire fan base the way our poor Forsaken Philip has been treated over the last 30 years. I will say the Godspeed You Black Emperor reference would have been enough to get him in here anyway. So props to him. So typically we only do 1 or 2 games of the week, but the slate this week is so good that we didn't really want to do weird backdoor treatments of these games. We essentially have 4 games of the week, but we can't really dive into all of them in depth because we'd be here for 4 hours. So what we're going to do with the other 3 is we're just going to focus on one big thing from these other 3 titanic games that we're getting in week 7. Let's start with the Lions at the Vikings. Vikings are -2.5 in this game. The thing I wanted to focus on here is just Ben Johnson and Brian Flores like trading haymakers between each other. Right now, if you're looking at however you want to describe it, like a Knights of the Round Table sort of thing, Mount Rushmore, however many seats you want to put there, Ben Johnson is there with offensive play callers and architects in the NFL. He is part of a very elite club. And what Brian Flores is doing is unlike anything any defensive coordinator in football is putting together. So those 2 guys going at each other is pretty much the best shit you can get as a football nerd right now.
Yeah, I mean, if you held up both of your hands and had one for offense, one for defense, and tried to count the amount of coordinators that you would take before each of these guys, you wouldn't get to the end of you wouldn't get to all 5 fingers. Like, I think both of these guys are doing an incredible job right now, and like it's very fun because I think stylistically this is a really really good matchup because I think Brian Flores tends to do his best against teams that are like want to throw a lot, they want to be in gun a lot, they want to get you
Yeah.
in these passing looks. The Lions are like the opposite of that, where they just don't want to do any of that. So it's like a very cool styles makes fights type of matchup here.
Watching what he did to Goff last year, it's so funny that you say that because the answer last year, it was like, I don't know what else to do. I'm just going
Right. He
to
was
push
like,
the
I don't
blitz
care.
button every single time. I was looking at the numbers on True Media today. What percentage of Goff's dropbacks do you think Flores blitzed last year in both games combined?
I mean, like instinctually, I just want to say all of them, which I know is not actually possible, and
You're
nobody would
not
do that.
far
But
off.
is it closer to all of them than
It's
I don't know,
it's
25%?
It's much closer than that. It's almost closer to all of them than 50%. 73% of the dropbacks last year, he sent a blitz when they played the Lions. That's absolutely insane. And why I think that's particularly interesting with this version of the Lions. Going back and watching them today, I pretty much queued up all of the blitzes that they've seen the entire year. NFL Pro is awesome.
Oh,
And
dude, it's like a game changer. It's a cheat code.
it
It's so
is
good.
so nice to be able to do that shit. Goff is 3rd in EPA per dropback against blitzes this year. He's been really, really good against the blitz. But the thing that jumps out to me more than just his decision making, which is better than it's ever been, he's playing at a very high level, is just how well coached they clearly are, no matter where the pressure is coming from. There was one, I think it was in week 1, where they had a play action pass to the right, and there was a nickel blitz coming off the left side. And Ragnow sells the play action fake for a second, but knows the nickel is coming. So spins back around and gets a piece of the nickel just as Goff is getting the throw off. So there's that. There's Gibbs always seeming to understand where he should be going in pass protection after a play action fake. There's Montgomery just taking on a linebacker in the A gap against the Bucs. There's Sewell understanding, all right, I see this guy coming. I'm just sliding off of here. We're passing this off to the right guard. It's beautiful to watch. So you have one of the most buttoned up, well-coached offenses in the league, especially at handling pressure. They are 30th in the amount of unblocked pressures they've allowed this year. It's 8. There's only 2 teams in the league that have been better than them. And you have a defense that is better than anyone at manipulating how you want to handle that stuff and at trying to get free runners at the quarterback and in terrorizing the guy under center. So which gives between those two? I don't really have a good answer, but I'm just excited to watch it.
I'm very excited to watch it. And, it even kind of goes further than just the pass protection stuff for Detroit, because obviously they are really good there. I mean, Ragnow is one of maybe 2 or 3 centers that can get away with some of the stuff that you were talking about. He's just fantastic and really helps them a lot in terms of like the communication up there. What they've done with Gibbs as a pass protector, I think, is important, because when he was coming out of college and even early on in his career, that was not really part of the game for him, is being able to pass protect at that level. So again, it speaks to the coaching that they've gotten him to that level where he's been a little bit better. He's not, prime Ezekiel Elliott or Le'Veon Bell or whatever, but he's definitely gotten to the point where he can be helpful for them there. And then just in terms of like concepts, like they are always running, especially on like these clear passing downs, whether it's 2nd and long, 3rd and 9 or whatever, they're running a lot of beaters where they are just like very obviously trying to get one guy open, whether it's Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta. Like they are really doing a good job of structurally making sure that's the case. And then Jared Goff just does a really good job of firing on those throws. Like he is full steam ahead, full confidence in the system that he is playing in. And he does a really good job of just throwing that stuff. So it's a pretty beautiful marriage of what they've been able to put together schematically, and then just the level that these players are executing at right now. It's really cool to watch.
It's funny because we talked about this a little bit after the Bucs game, where blitzing him is a losing proposition right now, and blitzing them, I think blitzing them is a good way of putting it. Blitzing the Lions, that EPA stat, that's always a team stat, but particularly here, it's very much a team stat. So when you blitz the Lions right now, it's going to come back to bite you for the most part, or has. When teams have had a little bit of success, it's with some of those creeper simulated pressures where they're only bringing 4, but they're dropping somebody out, and every once in a while, you can get him. He's going to throw a pick, or there's going to be a little hesitation, and that's where some of the unraveling starts to happen with the Lions passing game. The surprising thing about the Vikings is, despite all that crazy shit that they're doing, they actually don't run that many creepers or simulateds. They've only done it on but essentially right in line with league average. And if you compare that to a team like the Bucs, where I think we would probably put them in similar families with how they want to play, the Bucs are at 3 times the league average. So I wonder if we see some more non-traditional wonky shit from the Vikings in this game, just because the Lions have had trouble with that sort of stuff specifically.
I think we should, just because, Goff and the offense in general, very, very good at finding answers. And then Jared Goff is really good at triggering on them. The problem is when he thinks he has an answer and he thinks there's a void, and then, oh shit, there's not. And Dennis Gardeck is jumping into the window.
That's
is where
a perfect example.
Jared Goff.
That's a perfect example.
That's how you can get Jared Goff, is thinking that he has an answer and then he doesn't. And he obviously doesn't really have that, like, okay, I can holster the ball now and go make a play. Like, that's just not in his things. Like, he's gonna throw the ball, and so you have to just bait him into some of this stuff.
I want to be clear about some of the nuance here. They drop a guy off the line of scrimmage more than any defense in the NFL. But when they're doing that, they're just playing coverage, or they're still blitzing. So there are going to be guys in unconventional windows. They're just not doing it the same way that a team like the Bucs are, where they're doing actual simulated pressures. This is a lot of like roundabout ways of describing very complex answers to this sort of stuff. I have a feeling there's a very simple answer to how you can deal with a team like this. And I'm assuming that you fall on the simple answer side of things.
Yeah, the simple answer is what this Detroit team built themselves to do, which is beat the shit out of the other team by running the ball, and specifically like running duo. Because I think what I've kind of come to is like, a lot of the times what you'll get against these teams that just like to throw a ton of pressures, if the offense doesn't feel like they have a lot of answers, they'll just wad it up in pass protection. They'll put like a tight end to the left, a running back to the right. They'll scrunch the offensive line inside, and they'll just be like, all right, we are going to pray that nobody gets through. You know what kind of does that for your run game? Running duo, where you just get a bunch of double teams, and if they're going to send a bunch of extra guys, okay, we'll get a yard or two of vertical push here. A guard will come off, and he'll go take the guy who's flying through the gap. The Lions should do that. They have built this offensive line. They have built their running game to do all this stuff. And I still don't think the defensive interior talent is like all that good for Minnesota. They've just gotten by schematically being better and faster than other teams. This is the one offensive line that is ready to just punch you in the mouth.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because all those run blitzes, all those stunts, all that weird stuff, it matters a little bit less when you're getting consistently blown off the ball. And right now, those guys have played better than you'd expect, the Jerry Tillery's, players like that. But Harrison Phillips is banged up and might miss this game. Blake Cashman is likely going to miss this game. So now the way that you would approach them anyway, the path is a little bit easier because they're so banged up in the spine of the defense. So it's a heavyweight fight, man. I'm very, very excited to watch what those two units going against each other looks like. Speaking of heavyweight fights, next game here, Texans at Packers. Packers are -2.5. Usually we would break down like a side of the ball here, right? But I wanted to look at this game a little bit differently because when I was watching Jordan Love against the Cardinals yesterday, I was starting to think about just his arm talent in the context of the league in general. And some of the throws that he was making in that game, whether it's the retreating cover zero touchdown, the throw, I think it was on a 4th and 2 that for no reason, he like rips a ball into traffic over the middle of the field and it's a catch.
The one to Watson. Yes.
Yes. Which is just like, all right. I mean, I guess that's a solution to that problem. And then obviously the huge Watson touchdown, like the guy's just got what he can do with the football is absolutely ridiculous. If you're looking at him and comparing it to all the quarterbacks in the league, where do you think his purely as a thrower, where do you think he ranks right now? And where do you think CJ Stroud also fits into that?
I think both of those guys are like right in that second tier. To me, the first tier is obviously Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen. I still think Matthew Stafford is in there. Obviously, he's a little bit like does it a little bit less on the move than some of those other guys, but just the raw power is like it's so different, man. And some of the arm angles he can get to us. So I'm still willing to give it to him.
I don't know what to do with Stafford in this conversation because one of the things that makes Love so dangerous is his ability to get this stuff off while moving. Not necessarily on the run, but while drifting in the pocket. Like there's an elasticity to his arm and some of the throws that he can get off that just very few guys in the league have. And I honestly, Josh Allen has a cannon. And what Josh Allen can do just purely from a physical talent perspective is in the same realm as these guys. But like creative throws and the amount of throws in your bag, I honestly think that Jordan Love like might be in the same conversation as Josh Allen. I still think Mahomes probably deserves the top spot, but I think Jordan Love is probably there. And Stroud, the difficulty with Stroud is it's not like the arm angle changes in the same way that it is with some of these other guys. Again, elasticity isn't the word that I would come back to. With Stroud, it's the trajectory and the flight path of these throws. Like the way that he can just like pop the ball over people, or it's the ball travels differently than it does for almost any other quarterback in the league, even if it's not as flashy as some of the out of structure plays that some of these guys are making. So they're doing it in different ways, but I think they're both probably in the conversation in that second tier, kind of fighting to be in the first tier of what we're talking about.
I think they're kind of funny to talk about because I think physically they're actually very similar, like just in terms of the arm strength. I think a lot of the elasticity I think is actually pretty similar. It's just that Jordan Love is a lot more willing to do it. Which isn't to say CJ Stroud's not. It's just that CJ Stroud 90% of the time, if he's clean, if he's on time, all this stuff, he's just gonna throw a normal, very good looking ball. Whereas Jordan Love will kind of just do this like bouncing, weird, rearing back, all this type of weird stuff, really for no reason. Like I swear, if you watch Jordan Love, there is no quarterback who plays with their weight on their back foot the way that Jordan Love does. Like nobody else throws this way. It's really fascinating, but he still gets really good rotation and the ball comes out anyway. And you're like, all right, I wouldn't teach that to any young quarterback, but it works.
I love this because I think that's, if I'm trying to articulate the difference between him and Stroud, that's probably it, is that the base that Stroud is working from and the fundamentals of how he's actually playing the position are always correct. Like the bones are so solid, but he's doing such weird stuff from those platforms. Like with Stroud, it's always I'm going to do this like standing here while trying to record a podcast. He'll be perpendicular to the line of scrimmage, but he'll throw the ball across his body
Yeah.
where the trajectory of the ball just makes no sense, but his feet are always in the exact right place and the foundation is always right. With Love, it's all over the place, and you're getting these attempts at like throwing the ball from different platforms. So they're doing it in very different ways, but it's no less impressive on either end.
That's actually great because like CJ Stroud, his feet are always in line, and then he can do whatever he wants with his upper body to make it work. Jordan Love will do whatever he wants with his feet, and then somehow he always gets his shoulders square to the target and throws in. It's like I don't understand how you got away with that, but then he does. It's honestly fascinating to watch him throw.
There's one more thought that I just had. Stroud doesn't drop the arm down very often. A
No,
lot of the time for him, he's actually elevating the release point of where he's
he'll get like
throwing the
on his
ball.
toes.
He'll
Like
get
if
on his
he needs to.
toes and it gets higher rather than lower like some of these other guys. But that's how when you see some of these throws, like the one to Diggs last week, where to the right sideline, where he's like the ball like pops out of his hand. It makes no sense. It's unlike any other quarterback I've ever seen. And just I think what we're trying to like dig into here is stylistically, like, why do these guys feel so exciting? And because they do. Like there's just something to the way that each of them plays the position that I feel like have made them some of the most compelling down to down watches in the entire league. And the fact that we have them going against each other this week, like I hope you can just hear the excitement and like what that is supposed to turn into.
And it's always fun watching two quarterbacks who are physically very similar. Like again, I think athletically, arm talent, all that stuff, they're very similar. But it's a lot like watching Josh Allen versus Justin Herbert, where physically, if you just stood them next to each other and you watched them throw and you watched them run, you'd be like, this is probably the same player. And then you watch them in reality and like watch what they do on the field. You're like, wait, these guys couldn't be any more different from each other. And I think that's exactly how I feel watching Stroud and Love.
I will give Stroud this nod though. I think that Stroud plays with more, let's call it ambition than Justin Herbert does at times. Where I think he's trying to get away with some shit that Justin Herbert is not, because I think Justin Herbert is a little bit more cautious just in terms of the overall decision making and the avoidance of bad plays. I think Stroud is willing to push the envelope a little bit more than Justin Herbert is in this analogy. I honestly think the best comparison for this is what it's going to look like between Justin Herbert and Drake May. Like Drake May, I
Mm.
think, has a chance to look like the unhinged version of Justin Herbert in a good way if he eventually reaches his final four.
That was literally my comparison for him was Justin Herbert with like 10% of Josh Allen's brain.
I will watch that player. I'm intrigued by that player. The last thing I wanted to mention about this matchup specifically, and just thinking about what the Packers offense and what Jordan Love could look like against the Texans defense. The Packers offense has been really good, right? And Jordan Love has been really good if you look at the numbers. It's funny because I think we've had that 2 or 3 week period where we were all freaking out about all these check down Charlie shit against these two high defenses. Love is second in air yards per completion against two high coverages this year. Like the touchdown he threw to Watson, that like go ball touchdown, that's against quarters. Like it's a too high coverage. And it's a reminder that you can still attack teams with playing those coverages if you isolate those guys. The one area where he has struggled though is that against man coverage, he has not been very good this year. Right now, EPA per dropback against man coverage, he's just behind Deshaun Watson and Bo Nix. He's only played a few games, very small sample, but just something to keep in mind, especially when you compare it to what he's looked like against zone coverage. And the other part of this, Jordan Love is getting blitzed at the highest rate in the entire league right now. Some of that is playing against Flores, but it hasn't just been isolated to that game. Part of the reason for that is it's working. On third downs, when Jordan Love is blitzed, he's dead last in the NFL in EPA per play. On third downs, when he's not blitzed, he's first. So the chasm here is just absolutely massive. And I think why that matters against this Texans team is this Texans team will heat you up, man. They have absolutely no reservations about sending extra bodies at the quarterback. So the way that they want to play, I think actually aligns up with some of the weaknesses that we've seen from the Packers offense so far.
They'll heat you up and they'll play man. I think they've been more willing to
Yeah.
do that this year than last.
They play a ton of man coverage on third down.
Yeah, and I think with the Packers, the issue is it's kind of twofold. One of them is like just a schematic preference. The other is just personnel. In terms of personnel, Jaden Reed is kind of their only guy who consistently separates. And even he is not like a true just one-on-one beat anybody. He's like a good route runner, but not insane. Some of the other guys like Romeo Dobbs can get pushed off of some of his routes. Dontavian Wicks in general is just an inconsistent player. Watson isn't really a true separator. But then schematically, I just talked about with the Lions. It's like, oh, they run all these beaters to specifically get one guy open, blah, blah, blah. The Packers don't do that, man. They have 7 guys in protection, and they run all their routes 12 yards down the field and go, all right, Jordan Love, go make a play. And that's cool, and that's volatile, and like it can work. It's just that in the small sample so far, they haven't quite figured out how to get it there.
I will say, Packers are catching the Texans at the right time. Jimmy Ward, Kamari Laster, Henry Toto, all in danger of missing this game. Azeez Al-Shire also missed practice earlier in the week. So got a lot of banged up guys, especially in the spine of the defense for Houston, and we'll see how much that matters on Sunday. Last game here, Ravens at Bucs. Ravens are -3.5 in this game. I think the more intriguing, compelling side of the ball here for me is what this Bucs offense can look like against the Ravens defense. And I feel like the biggest question about this game, we know the Ravens are going to put up a shitload of points, right? The Ravens offense is absolutely rolling right now. The Bucs are struggling to defend the pass. I think this game is going to come down to, can the Bucs keep pace with this Ravens offense, and can they find enough explosives to make that happen?
I'm just not sure that they can. Like, there's something about, for as good as the Bucks offense is, like there's something about it that still feels like mildly off. And there's also like another part of me that still feels like the Ravens are going to figure it out. Like, I think I've just convinced myself now that every week I'm going to walk into it and being like, this is the week the Ravens figure it out. But I kind of think this is the week the Ravens figure it out.
If you look at just the pure numbers, there's actually a lot of data that would suggest that this is a tough matchup for the Ravens, and the Bucs would be able to keep pace. The Bucs are third in explosive play rate right now, league wide. But how they've been getting them is actually very weird. So even though they're third league wide in explosive play rate, the Bucs are averaging 9 air yards per attempt on their explosive pass plays. The league average is 18. So they're getting all these explosive plays without really pushing the ball downfield. The only quarterbacks in the league that have fewer vertical routes, throws on vertical routes this year than Baker Mayfield are Matthew Stafford, which is kind of weird, but I guess explained by the receiving talent, Daniel Jones, and Patrick Mahomes, the discussion we've already had.
Right.
That's it. And the Bucs have still been able to be explosive, and it's because they're getting these monster chunks by throwing the ball underneath on screen passes this year. The Bucs are 16 of 17 for 143 yards. Baker's averaging 0.43 EPA per dropback on screens. The league average on EPA per dropback for screens is negative, and he's at 0.43. So it's just a very strange offense. They've been really efficient and they've been really explosive, but they're doing it unlike any team in the league. And why I think that matters is the Ravens have given up the highest explosive play rate in the NFL, but a lot of that has been on big down the field throws. So if the Bucs want to live in the same way, they're not going to run into the tackling issues against Baltimore like they did against a team like the Saints last week.
Maybe that's why I just don't feel like the Bucks, like how they've made their offense work, actually works against the Ravens. Because, like you said, the Ravens, when they give up explosive plays, somebody's in the wrong spot on the back end, or they don't float up to deep enough in the zone that they need to, or there's some sort of miscommunication, like handling a bunch or something like that, and somebody just gets free down the sideline. It's not a they can't tackle issue. I mean, Kyle Hamilton is one of the best tackling guys in the league. Obviously, most of their defensive backs are good tacklers. Roquan Smith, for whatever issues he's had as a pure coverage defender this year, still really good at running sideline to sideline and making tackles. And so, like, tackling is not the issue. They don't give up explosives that way. They only really do it down the field. And so, if you're going to have this Bucs team where most of their explosives are, it's either in the screen game or like last week, a couple of their checkdowns, like the Saints just completely didn't pick up Sean Tucker coming out of the backfield on a man coverage call, which was crazy to me. That was a blown coverage. Or like the Chris Godwin, like I said, he just catches a check down, goes crazy. Like that.
He's done that a few times this year. He's a really good after the catch player. He always has been, but it's really shown up this year.
Yeah, he is. It's just, this is like, for as much as the issues as the Ravens defense kind of has right now, I just don't think the tackling fundamentals are one of them. Almost all of their issues to me on defense are just communication in the back end. And I keep saying it. This is the week they're going to figure it out. I trust by December they'll get there. Maybe it's not this week, but I just feel like if your only issues are communication in the back end, but this is not really a passing offense that beats you that much that way down the field, I think the Ravens are probably going to be okay.
I have more faith in the Bucs' ability to keep pace in this game than you do. And I don't think they've done a lot of it this year. Again, they've gotten their explosives in different ways. And just one more bit of context. They're averaging 9 air yards per attempt on those explosive passes of 20 plus yards. No other team in the league is below like 12 and a half. So it's not just that they're half of the league average. They're in their own zip code. But they've still shown an ability in stretches to push the ball down the field and get chunk plays. And one of the ways they've been able to do it consistently is with guys running vertical routes from the slot. Think about the Mike Evans play against the Falcons where he runs that slot fade for a touchdown. Or they're doing things where they're getting these guys in condensed splits as the number one receiver, and they have tons of space to work with on the outside. Sterling Shepard had a double move against Quinyon Mitchell in the Eagles game. Mike Evans had a big corner route against Washington in week 1. And we've seen the Ravens struggle with some of that stuff. You mentioned some of the issues with communication against like bunches and stacks. That Mike Gesicki corner route that they hit against the Ravens a couple weeks ago. If you can get those safeties isolated in vertical situations, there are yards to be had there. And I do think that the Bucs specifically and how they want to construct their vertical passing game, I think they might have a few opportunities in this game. So even if they might have to get them a slightly different way than they have for most of the season, I actually do think they have the gear to make this work.
I don't necessarily think you're right. There might be like a part of me deep down in my brain that even though I think Baker Mayfield is playing really well, there's just like a part of me that
I get
just
it.
can't all the way get there against a defense, like a staff that I still really trust. It's like that is truly probably what my inhibitor is here, is that I just, for as well as Baker Mayfield is playing, and he is playing like very comfortably in the top half of the league right now. He's playing
Totally.
good ball, but against this staff and against this pass rush, I'm just like, I just don't know, man.
I'm willing to explore this because I think there's something to what you're saying. And I've gone the complete other way where I think that there are some guys in the league that I'm very conscious that I wrote them off too quickly. And I think that my willingness to embrace their second chances, it's almost like me exploring how much I don't know and me becoming more open to how little I know about this stuff. And so guys like Goff, guys like Baker Mayfield, guys like Geno, even like Darnold to an extent, I think I almost want to root for them because I want to believe that these sorts of like renaissances for these quarterbacks is possible. If that
I
makes
want
sense.
I want to root for them. Baker has been so much more fun to watch this year than in years past. Like, he's playing with an unbelievable amount of confidence, and he always had the arm talent. So you finally get a guy who's throwing confident with that arm. It's been fun to watch. He's got more sauce to him as like a runner this year, which like 2 years ago, it seemed like he never picked the right time to scramble and run. And now it seems like he only picks the right time to scramble and run, which is really
We talked about in
interesting.
the offseason though, because we were like some of the volatility with him as a scrambler, some of the things they were doing on third down, was that going to swing back the other way a little bit? And what would that mean for this offense? And I think that there's kind of a discourse around these Bucs teams where it's like, oh, people are so slow to believe in the Bucs. Like there's just no national respect for the Bucs. The Bucs were a below average offense last year. They were definitively a below average offense, even if the story about Baker and Dave Canales and all that stuff was really cool. They are really good offensively this year. Like you don't have to caveat it. You don't have to be like, they're interesting, but this is just an objectively good offense. So I'm more prone to respect and believe in what this version of the Bucs looks like because they're better than the version that we saw last year.
I agree with that. The one thing that I just kind of remembered too, and maybe this is why I had this sneaking suspicion that I might not trust Baker here. The Bucks interior is still not very good. This Ravens defensive line, their interior is
That's a good thing to
something,
point out.
man.
Yeah, it's a good thing
Travis
to point out.
Jones, Namdi Matabike, those guys are on a different level right now.
That is worth examining and worth acknowledging. And I probably should have thought about that a little bit more before I started putting my eggs in the Bucs basket. But this is a game that I'm very excited to watch. Like I truly hope that we get like a 35-31 sort of game between these two teams. And I do think that's potentially on the table. Bauer, what's the over under in this game?
49 and a half.
Okay. So it's not crazy, but it's not low. So I'm really hoping that we get a decent amount of points in this game because I do think that both offenses are capable of that gear, and I would like to see it happen. All right, it's time for this. Might only be interesting to me, but just a little small thing, a little small quirky thing that we're keeping an eye on as we get into the week here. What's yours this week?
The Giants front versus the Eagles. There's a chance they make this game not fun for Philly.
This is so perfect. This is exactly what the segment exists for. It's for you to be like, I don't know, man. Giants front's looking pretty good these days.
This is the Giants team. Am I excited about them? No, God, no. But watching this front, They're good, man. Obviously, Dexter Lawrence. There's really no. I don't have to intro him. He's incredible. Brian Burns has been playing at a really high level. After the first couple weeks, it didn't seem like he was maybe the player that they thought they were getting, but I think he's been really good lately. Azeez Ojulari obviously had an insane game against the Bengals. They have this undrafted free agent defensive tackle, Elijah Chapman. He's kind of got something to him, man. A little bit of juice, like some of the picks and stunts that they were running that he could get other guys free. I think if he's their fourth or fifth best guy and he can like facilitate good play from the other guys, that's a good spot for this defensive line to be in. And I say all of that with the thing in mind with the Eagles. They're still not a good team when they get pressured and when teams throw bodies at them, and the Giants are still willing to do that. And so I think that there is a world where the Giants can get enough pressure on Jalen Hurts, make things unfun for him, get him outside of the pocket where he typically doesn't want to be right now, and really just make this a dirty, disgusting rock fight of a game. And if the Giants can do that and score, I don't know, luck into 20 points, like they can win this game.
I will admit that I had my reservations about how good the Giants front would be this year, just because I wasn't sure about the non-Dexter Lawrence parts of this. Brian Burns has shown flashes, but I think that there were moments over the last couple of years where Brian Burns' reputation outpaced what his production looked like. He's been really good this year. Dexter Lawrence is maybe my favorite player in the league. Like when I'm watching him, I think that he's might be my favorite football player to watch.
Because
in the
there's
NFL.
Nobody like him. Like
yes,
there are other
that's exactly
fantastic players, but there is nobody like the 340 pounder who is the best pass rusher on the field all the time.
And I have not watched them enough this year, and I'm fully willing to admit that. When I watch Dexter Lawrence, I think he might be my favorite defensive player in the league. The Giants defense in general, though, I think there are two units that I've kind of put away in the back of my head for I need to watch them more. Like they clearly are deserving of our attention, and it's the Giants defense and the Chargers defense. Like if we're trying to stack up under the hoods for the second half of the year, I think those two have pole position in terms of groups that we need to pay a little bit more attention to. And by we, I mean me. I need to pay a little bit more attention to them. So I think giving them a shout out, just acknowledging that they've been playing pretty well, it's a very good thing to do here. Speaking of the Chargers, might only be interesting to me is, are the Chargers just the frisky team of 2024? Like, have they supplanted the Arizona Cardinals as the frisky team that is going to be a thorn in the side of good teams for the entire year? I think there's a chance that they have. Right? They haven't played many good teams. It was really just the Chiefs, like the only good team that they've played. But they gave the Chiefs all they could stand. It was a very annoying game against the Chiefs. And so I think this game specifically, it's almost for the belt of a team that might not be good, but they are at least mildly compelling, and they're going to give you some interesting games. Chargers defense has been really good this year. We're going to talk about them at some point. We don't have under the hood this week because of all the games of the week. We probably would have done the Chargers defense this week. So very excited to watch them against a Cardinals offense that I think is a good litmus test. The Cardinals offense isn't great, but they're the perfect sort of team to measure yourself against. If you're a good defense, I think they're going to have trouble against you. If you're a bad defense, they're capable of taking advantage of you. So I think this is a good test for this Chargers defense. And I think the flashes we saw from the Chargers offense last week and Justin Herbert as he gets healthier specifically, I don't know, man. I'm kind of interested in this. And I know I've walked this path many, many times and it's burned me, but this feels a little bit different. I'm rationalizing it, but it feels a little bit different.
How many times have you told yourself it feels a little bit different? This
is an abusive relationship. Like this is something where I absolutely should not be entertaining this. And if I cared about my well-being, I wouldn't do this again. But I'm going to convince myself that the uniform is the same, but the reasons that I'm interested in it are different. So that's why it's okay.
I mean, a Harbaugh team is objectively different than what they've been.
And it's more about the Jesse Minter of all of this than it is about the Justin Herbert of all of this. And that's why I feel like it's okay.
Well, and you know what? Even with Minter, what I've really been impressed by with this defense, they can defend the run now. They are so good at defending the run now. Atito Ogbonia, who you brought up I think maybe last week, has done a really good job in that sense. Poona Ford has been really good for them up
looks
front.
Incredible.
He looks awesome. Khalil Mack the dude is like 33 and he's still the best run defending edge in the league. Like he's just truly incredible. Tuli Pelotu is like really, really good at defending the run too. Like he's a very smart player. So I really enjoy him. And then the linebackers. Denzel Perryman, he'll come up and hit people. He's really good between the tackles, better between the tackles than any of the guys they've had in the past few years. Like, when
since
they were running,
Denzel Perryman.
Yeah, literally, he's oh my God. What a Chargers linebacker moment when you bring back Denzel Fairman and you're like, yeah, he's the best guy we've had since him when we cut him a few years ago. So that's true. But then even like Deion Henley has given them a little bit of something in that spot. So like they've just the fact that they can defend the run now has unlocked them to do some of the stuff they have been wanting for years to do in the two high world coverage wise. And then Minter has just been, I think, calling it really well. So it's been cool to watch. I didn't expect it to be this far along this fast. I really didn't.
Would you say that they might be the Frisky team that you're paying attention to?
I think I would have to say so. And you know what? It's a Jim
Maybe
Harbaugh
we
team.
already know the answer.
It's a Jim Harbaugh team. Like we should have known that this was probably gonna like whether we even liked watching it or not. And I still don't like watching the offense. And I like the defense is good, but they don't even do like that much interesting stuff. Like there's not that much about it that's like, wow, I need to watch this team. But they're 4-2, and they're probably gonna win. And like, or they're really competitive, and they're an insane team. It's ridiculous. What's
Well,
funny
guess what?
too?
I'm going to make you watch it over the next couple weeks, so you don't have a choice.
What's actually really funny about it too, with them specifically against the Cardinals are frisky because their high end stuff is cool, and some of what they do is really interesting. Like the three high stuff on defense, or some of what they do with their fronts are cool. Buda Baker, like his high end talent is really really cool, and then offensively they do this stuff with pulling and Marvin Harrison Jr. But like the meat and bones of all of it, it's just not very good. Whereas like the Chargers are the opposite, where they have all the high floor stuff, and the ceiling is like I don't know yet.
It's a very good way to contrast both teams. I will say, I'm fine with the weird Cardinal stuff on offense and like, oh, that's cool because the results are reasonable. Like they haven't been great, but they've been an average to slightly above average offense. You can save the weird stuff on defense for me right now. Like all the
Bad.
weird stuff they're doing on
Yeah.
defense. Like I don't care how much. It's kind of where we were last year. It's like, yeah, they're doing some cool stuff. They're still the worst defense in the league or one of the worst defenses in the league. So it's a little bit less interesting to me than the actually effective weird stuff that they're doing on offense.
I agree with that. I at least look, there's going to be 8 to 10 really bad defenses in most years. At least when I watch the Cardinals, I'm like, huh, that's a new idea. It still sucks and you gave up 12 yards, but like, I didn't think I would see that.
Yeah, I'm trying to do a little bit less of that. A little less like, oh, weird for weird's sake is worth talking about. Like the Cardinals defense is very, very bad. Like that, I think we can not pay attention to them for a little while. All right. It's time for this week's Take Tribunal. This is where we float out a take that, we want to bring before the committee and just see how everybody feels about it. I was thinking about this a couple nights ago in the post Amari Cooper trade world. And I just found myself thinking there should be more of this. Like we should just have more trades like this. And I know that they gave up a lot. I know it's 11 games of Amari Cooper for a third round pick. Part of that is because they paid nothing in salary. It's one of the only reasons that they could even do this trade is because Amari Cooper was making $1 million. So the actual price tag, I think, is a little bit misleading when you compare it to other midseason trades that have happened. Even with that in mind, there should just be more of this. We should have more of these trades. Teams should be more aggressive in trying to make moves like this when you're in the position that the Bills are in. If you're last year's Seahawks, you probably shouldn't give up a second round pick for Leonard Williams. Even if I kind of understood it in the moment and probably supported it to an extent, you probably shouldn't do that. If we're trying to build a set of rules for when this is allowed, I think that you have to be like a definitive Super Bowl contender. And part of the way that you get to that place is if you have a quarterback like Josh Allen. And we've seen the Chiefs make moves like this, right? We've seen them go well. We've seen them go poorly. The Kadarius Toney trade and them trading a third round pick for Kadarius Toney is never going to matter again. Like they won multiple Super Bowls. Nobody gives a shit that they gave up a third round pick for Kadarius Toney. So if you have legitimate Super Bowl aspirations and you have a quarterback who justifies those, and like the Bills, you have a defined weakness. Like this is absolutely something that was worth doing when you think about the construction of this team, where they have issues, and where solutions would potentially bring them into a different tier of teams. The whole point here is to win Super Bowls. It's not to like sputter to 10 wins and be like, oh man, we sold some playoff tickets. That's not what this should be about. So I fully support this happening. I fully support this trade, and I fully believe that we should have more of this type of move.
I'm all the way on board with this because good or bad, whether these trades work out, whatever, this is the honorable way to build a football team. And not everybody has to do what the Rams did where you sell every single asset that you have.
But
I still that's still
think
better
about
than what
Devon
the Browns
Miller
did.
and OBJ trades.
Yes. Those were literally
Super Bowl.
crucial. Yes. That stuff was crucial for them getting it done. And like, again, not everybody has to go that insane, but even that, it worked for them. And even like when they like had to scrap it down and rebuild it, like they still were kind of competitive after the fact. Obviously their roster right now
And
is
you've
in a
got the
great spot.
Lombardi in the trophy case. Like that's the whole
Right.
point.
You're good for 10 years. Nobody's gonna like push you on anything for 10 years once you win the Lombardi. And so yeah, I think you should, especially when you're in this position. And when you have a quarterback in the Bills case specifically, as good as Josh Allen. Like, yeah, man, go and do whatever you can, squeeze out whatever little things that you can get each season. And yeah, maybe it is only an 11 game rental and you never see Amari Cooper in Buffalo again. Okay. If this is the move that you think can get you from how we'll be good in the divisional, but I don't know about the championship round. I don't know about the Super Bowl. But this is the move that you think gives you the juice to actually get to the Super Bowl and maybe compete. Then yeah, do it. Who cares if it costs you a third round pick? Like go for it. That third round pick could be anything. It could be an Amari Cooper. Like you might as well go and get this guy that you know is definitively a good player and add him to a team that you have right now, especially like again with the Bills case specifically, Amari Cooper bumps down all of their receivers into the roles that they
Yeah.
should be playing. Keon Coleman should not be your number one outside receiver. Okay, he doesn't really have to be anymore because you have Amari Cooper. Khalil Shakir should not be your top target getter. Okay, he doesn't have to be anymore because you have Amari Cooper. Mac Hollins should not be a significant part of your offense as a pass catcher. He should be more of a blocker and ancillary player. Okay, he can go do that now because you have Amari Cooper. Like it just everything bumps into place. And it's not, again, it's not one of those moves that, oh, we just brought a guy in because we think we need something. Like there's a very obvious vision for what a player like this does. And I think that goes back to your point of like making sure there are rules in place and certain conditions to be met for this stuff. But I think the Bills and the Amari Cooper trade absolutely fits into all that.
And I also think it's about balance, right? I mean, the reason that teams like the Eagles, for example, can get away with some of the trade ups they've done in the draft is they balance those with trades down. The Bills in this draft have an extra 2 because of the Stephon Diggs trade, and they have an extra 4 because the Bears traded up for Austin Booker in this year's draft. And so they traded a future 4th to go up and do that. You shouldn't throw away draft picks just because you have more of them. But if your mindset is, I'm going to accrue draft capital when it makes sense, and I'm going to be aggressive when it makes sense, and you're counterbalancing those two things, this is totally fine. And I think the idea that right now, a third round pick is like, oh man, they gave up a third round pick. Teams are trading away fourth round picks to move up 5 spots for like Matthew Bergeron and Riley Moss. And that's not even to speak to the quality of those players. It's just like, why is that okay on draft day for a guy you've never seen play in the NFL, but a third round pick for Amari Cooper is somehow unconscionable? That doesn't square to me.
That's what I don't get. Like we know that Amari Cooper is a good player, and some people are going to point to his numbers this year and be like, "Oh, he's not separating and he's not very
The
efficient." Blah blah blah.
2024 Browns do not
Dude,
count.
yeah, I think playing with Deshaun Watson when Amari Cooper was like very visibly upset with having to play in those conditions. I think
They
getting to
openly
go play
tried to
with
trade him before the
yes,
season.
yes, like I think he was very just didn't want to be there in Cleveland. Now you get to go play with one of the, I mean, what, the second, third best quarterback in the league. I'm sure he's going to be very rejuvenated to go put up 1,000 yards in these 11 games.
I will say, and I'm not even trying to be mean, I think that Western New York in the summer is like one of the most beautiful places in America. Like I love being in Buffalo in like June, July, August. I actually think it's like a really pleasant place. Getting traded to the Bills, I guess he lives in Cleveland, but getting traded to the Bills in the middle of October, that one's slightly tougher.
Yeah,
That one's slightly tougher.
he's going to get nuclear winter like very quickly.
Yeah, again, Cleveland and Buffalo. I mean, we're talking about like a couple hour drive, but it is a little bit harsher when you get up there in those Western New York winters. But overall, I firmly believe that we should see more of these, and I'm very glad the Bills made this move because it just makes the sport more interesting. It just makes things more exciting, and I'm fully on board with all of that.
It makes it more exciting because I think right now I looked at in the AFC, I look at the Chiefs who are 5-0, and then I look at the Ravens. I'm like, all right, class of their own. The Bills, really good team, but I'm not sure they're there. You bring in Amari Cooper, if he's what I think he is, okay, you're in that tier now. Good for you.
Yes, or even if you're slightly below it, even if you are now like
You give
right
yourself
there
a
with the
chance.
Texans, and if you watch that game against the Texans, the gap between the Bills and the Texans in that game was Amari Cooper and Khalil Shakir.
Yes, literally.
That
Yes.
was the gap. And now hopefully they will have both of those guys. Before we get to what we want to know in week 7, quick wins pool update. For those of you guys who didn't remember, we picked 7 teams each before the season. 5 teams we thought would be good, two teams that were slated to win. I think it was 6.5 games or less. And so we each have 7 teams. Whoever has fewer wins at the end of the year has to pay off what is going to be an embarrassing bet on Radio Row at the Super Bowl. If you guys remember last year, I wore a hot dog costume after losing to Nate. It's not the hot dog costume, but it's something adjacent to that. And it is something that I definitively do not want to do in the same way that I did not want to wear the hot dog costume. That is a professional space, and embarrassing yourself there is just not that fun. So I would not like to do it again. The problem is we're 7 weeks in and I'm already 4 games down. Derek is 23-17. Quick reminder, his teams are the Chiefs, the Lions, the Ravens. The fact that you have all 3 of those, what a fucking just disaster by me. The Cowboys, the Bills, the Patriots, and the Giants. Those are his 2 bad teams. My teams: Niners, Texans, Bengals, Packers, Dolphins, Titans, Raiders. The fact that I'm only down by 4 is crazy. Like, it's absolutely crazy considering how this season has gone. And that's actually why I feel pretty decent about where this might go. The fact that I have the Bengals, I am the Bengals of this exercise. It has not gone the way that I wanted over the first 7 weeks, but I think that there's legitimate potential here. Tua gets back healthy. Like, you're going to regret not having a bigger lead 7 weeks into the season, I think. I'm going to make you sweat it at least a little bit more than you should have.
You say that, but I think Tua coming back doesn't really scare me. So I think I'm feeling okay.
Okay. That's fine. The Dolphins going from the worst team in the league to merely frustrating every once in a while on offense, I think could be pretty big for me here. The one regret I have, I can't believe I picked the Raiders. Like, I just, even if and my rationalization at the time was, the defense might be pretty good, right? Like, if you're looking at all the bad teams, that unit has a chance to be a little bit better than some of the others. This reminds me of last year when in one of my fantasy drafts, there were really only 2 like elite receivers left in the auction because of all the guys that were kept. And it was Devontae and AJ Brown. And we were betting on Devontae, and I kept bidding him up, trying to get the price up. And I went $1 more just reflexively than the other guy was willing to pay. I got stuck with Devontae Adams, even though I wanted AJ Brown. Having to watch Devontae Adams catch passes from Jimmy Garoppolo and having to actively root for that for like half a season was one of the most painful things I've had to do as like someone with a rooting interest in a football setting. And I feel the exact same way about this year's Raiders. And I cannot believe I did it to myself again.
You played yourself, which is like kind of the issue with the Raiders. It's like they had the end of last year with Antonio Pierce, and they were like, we're just not going to hire anybody else. And it's like, that's not how you should have handled this.
You have the Patriots, and even though the Patriots may win fewer games than the Raiders, I still envy what you get to watch every week now with Drake May.
That's it. That is exactly why I picked the Patriots over the Raiders. Because you know what? At the end of the season, I feel like the Raiders probably will still have 1 or 2 more wins than the Patriots.
I don't even know if that's a guarantee.
It might not be. If Drake May continues to even improve it certainly won't be. But regardless of that, I was more willing to ride the Patriots roller coaster of being like, you know what? I kind of like this staff. Some of their players on defense are cool. The quarterback is a rock star. I will live with that even if they win 3 games. The Raiders, I just couldn't live with that experience, regardless of if they won 8 or 9 games.
I think that was the right view. That was the right way of approaching it. And again, I just am so deeply filled with regret. All right, let's round this out with what we want to know by the end of week 7. What do you got for me?
The Steelers offense, I don't even know at the time of recording if Russell Wilson is even going to be the starter, but
it seems like he is based on what Justin Fields was saying this afternoon.
Russ was taking first team reps. Justin Fields was talking as if he already had lost the job, even though they technically haven't announced it. So 1, I want to know if Russell Wilson is actually starting, and then 2, just what, if anything, looks different with Russell Wilson back there. You know, to me, he's like a more accurate passer, but not meaningfully so. And then otherwise, they have a lot of very similar issues in terms of where they're willing to throw the ball. So I just want to see if it looks any different with him back there.
It's a bummer. I just would have liked to have seen Justin Fields for most of the year and to see where he could have taken it. Also, like, his response this afternoon when being asked about it makes me wish he still had the job even more. I don't know if you saw the quotes. They asked him about him losing it and Russ potentially being the starter. And his response was like, I should have played better. I didn't play well enough. If I had played well enough, this wouldn't even be a conversation.
It was very thoughtful. Like, it wasn't bitter at all.
He's always been that way, though. He's always been that way. And through every step of the Chicago process, he was always a guy that was very, very easy to root for. He's clearly very thoughtful. He's clearly very smart. And I just can't imagine what that would be like to have somebody where you were God's gift since you were a young person, right? And you were one of the most talented people to do what you did from the time that you picked it up until the time that you were 21 years old. You're a first round pick. You have all of this talent. And for whatever reason, it just doesn't come together. And that process has to be the dissonance there just has to be so hard to square because it's like, man, like what is missing? Like, why can't I get to this place? And I think that as part of that process, he's handled every single step of it with such like toughness and grace that it's hard not to respect him despite what the results have looked like. And this afternoon was just another example of that for me.
Yeah, he's just a guy where I don't know, like win or lose or however great it looks like, he's just somebody I hope continues to get some degree of chances where he can figure this thing out because it's just kind of like you said, for it to kind of not go the way that he's wanted the past 3 4 years, it has to be tough. But he's handled it with such grace that you don't really see it that much from really young players.
No.
Like sometimes guys will get
'Cause he's
into
really
like
young. Imagine being
right.
really young and living through that sort of disappointment. It's fucking hard, man.
I mean, even take like Baker Mayfield, I feel like has really matured in that
Yeah.
sense and like the way that he handles himself and stuff compared to maybe the way that he did when he was 22, 23. But that's the difference is like Mayfield has done this for a long time. He's much older. And
He's
so
a dad.
right, he's a father, right? That'll change you a little bit. And so for Fields to just have that degree of maturity already it's cool to see.
What do I want to know for week 7? And I think it's this matchup is compelling. We could have talked about it at length. The Seahawks playing the Falcons. I'm excited to watch this game because I think it's potentially a huge game, like in the NFC wildcard race. I mean, if the Falcons steal this one or whoever wins this one, you have a tiebreak over a team that's likely going to be in a similar situation to you over the course of the year. And we did our team tiers this week with David Hellman. I put the Seahawks in the wildcards ... question mark portion because I can't quit Geno and I believe what the offense can be. And so my question is the defense just going to be flailing like all season? Like, is this just going to be a group that never finds its footing? And they played okay against the Niners last week, and the run defense was actually much better than it had been against the Lions at other points this season. And so I think this is going to be a good follow-up test because the Falcons are running the shit out of the ball. And so what the Seahawks can do against this Atlanta offense that's really starting to find its groove, I think this is going to be a good test for how we should feel about the Seattle defense moving forward. They're a little banged up. Rashawn Jenkins is hurt, but the front seven is healthier than it's been. So I just want to start to get a clearer picture of who this Seahawks team is. And I think the Falcons are going to be a good way for us to maybe understand that a little bit.
They really are a perfect measuring stick because the Falcons are an above average offense, but they're not an automatic walk into every game 28 points type offense. So if you can have a day where you look okay against them, I think that's a good spot to be in. But yeah, we'll see.
All right. That's all we've got for week 7. Great slate of games this week. Very, very excited to watch everything that we just talked about. So really looking forward to that. We will be back on Sunday night live on YouTube breaking down all of the action. So if it interests you, please come join us. For now, that's all we got. Appreciate you guys listening. Talk to you soon.